You could accept who you are, because I think when you do accept who you are, it allows you to say, I might not be 100% of my ideal, but I am enough, and I can navigate my world around me knowing that I have acceptance for myself. And I think that can be a really powerful thing when you are, walking around the planet and living your life.
Hello, and welcome to Make Today Well Live the podcast, Season 2, Episode 3, Radical Self-Acceptance. I'm Allie Norman Franks, Beverly Hills High School Wellness Counselor, and I'm here with our amazing guests, Melissa Lanes, and our two peer counselors, May Cohen and Kate Lewis. Thank you, Melissa, so much for joining us. She is the founder of the Fresh 20, an award-winning meal planning service using only 20 whole food ingredients a week. Her book has been featured in Prevention, New York Times, and InStyle magazine. She is also the mom of two boys, freshman and a junior in high school. We're so excited to have you on our podcast today and to get your recipe for self-acceptance.
Hi, my name is Kate Lewis. I'm a senior and peer counselor here at Beverly Hills High School. We are so happy to have you here, Melissa, especially in Women's History Month and your Self-Acceptance Month. And, we are in high school, so I want to start off with, how did you see yourself in high school?
Oh, it's so different than I see myself now. I think, it even gives me a little bit of a pause to go back to that moment of not feeling good inside of my skin when I was in high school and feeling like I never fit in, I didn't belong, all of those emotions still rise up in me really, really quickly. And I spent a large part of my life that way, probably until my mid-30s, feeling like I didn't belong and really just not feeling good inside of my skin. So yeah, high school was a little bit of a tough road.
Why in high school did you feel like you didn't belong in particular?
Yeah, when I looked in the mirror in high school, I saw a girl I'm biracial, and I saw a girl that came from, two different cultures that wasn't necessarily 100% part of one or 100% part of the other. So there was this feeling like there was something wrong with me because I couldn't identify solely with one part. And I feel like, I always felt like I wasn't Black enough or I wasn't white enough for one or the other side. So it was always this thing of looking in the mirror and noticing features that, might not be accepted by one side, or, so many different things, just from a physical thing, my nose might be too big, or my hair might be too kinky, or, or my skin might not be dark enough to blend in with, all of the other Black students that identified as that because of their physicality. So that's kind of what started it at a very young age of not fitting in. And then it led to really just not loving myself, and then I became an emotional eater, and then that kind of just started down this spiral of oh, okay, now I'm just eating every time I feel bad, and then it just made me feel worse, and then feeling like I didn't like myself physically in the mirror as well, not only just being biracial, but then I just started to get this crazy idea that I was not worthy just by my own physical being. So it was definitely a lot of different factors going on at once. And I remember, I came from a family that loved me dearly, and they always promoted confidence and love. But when you go out into the world and you go into a school environment, and other people might say things or react to you in a certain way, it kind of starts to on a cellular level, you start to believe that, what a nasty comment that someone makes and I remember one time I let my boyfriend cut my hair, he just made a complete mess of it, and I went, and it just became this frizzy, crazy, just a mess. And I went to school, and these girls walked down the hallway, and I just remember feeling out of sorts in my clothing, and and everything. And they just looked at me and they said, "Oh, poor thing." And that, I think that one phrase stayed with me until I was in my late 30s. Like every time that I would go into a situation, I would think, oh, that people are looking at me and thinking that. And it's still, like, you can tell, like, it brings up that crazy emotion, right? So I think that that it breaks my heart that is how people feel about themselves, especially in high school, a time when you should be exploring new things about yourself and learning new, learning how to manage relationships and do so many things. And then in the back of your head, you're thinking, oh, poor thing, or, oh, I'm ugly, or, oh, I don't fit in, or, oh, these people don't like me. And it just makes me so sad that, like, that just continues to be a theme in high school as we go on, because I just know that the other side of that is so amazing. And being able to, like, have self-love and just, like, stand up strong and say, like, no, I'm an amazing human being, and I'm, all of the things that you think in the back of your head don't really exist, but those little phrases stay with you for a really long time.
Well, as you said that, and as you have grown up and matured and, like, gone through so many different things, and I think learned to accept yourself and accept yourself as, a beautiful woman, and not, like, take those negative things, how have you practiced radical acceptance, and what is it to people who don't know what that is?
Yeah, okay, so radical acceptance is such a big concept, because it really means that you're diving all in to not only understanding and compassion for yourself and giving yourself grace, but for others as well. Because to accept yourself, you have to accept that other people are the way that they are, and that somebody's negative comments or their views of you, or somebody gossiping about you, isn't necessarily even have anything to do with you, right? So you have to accept the state of what is for radical acceptance, and then you just have to bring that into yourself and say, okay, like, yeah, I might have frizzy hair, and that's okay. Or, yeah, I might be not, the size that somebody thinks I should be, and that's okay. And so it really starts with just having this overall awareness that other people, every single person, even that person that you think is, the prettiest and most successful and wealthy and put together and fashionable and all of that, that they're dealing with the same exact sense of self-doubt that you might be in that particular moment. And sometimes even in a worse way, because they're wearing a mask that everybody puts on them, but underneath, like, their emotions are still feeling those same things, and they can't even express it. Like, nobody expects them to. It's like, how dare you say that, you have a bad feeling because, you drive this car, and you're considered pretty or whatever. And it's just accepting that we're all having this human experience is a pretty big concept. And then when you can just say, okay, like, everybody is having this human experience, so I'm experiencing this, but I'm not as important as I think I am, right? I think that that's part of radical acceptance, of saying, like, maybe it's not all about me. And if you can take yourself out of like, kind of the center of it, and be able to look in at it, you can go, oh, okay, like, we're all struggling, like, this is a thing, and it doesn't become so heavy on your shoulders about the way that you feel about yourself. It just opens up a door for you to practice a little bit more self-love.
When you talk about the fact that you're not only accepting yourself, what do you mean by also, like, accepting others, and, like, maybe having, like, gratitude or compassion for those who maybe put you down? How do you find that?
When we can kind of dial out and say, wow, there's a lot of us, right? And there's a lot of us experiencing, these ups and downs of life. When you can tap in and you can realize, wow, that person that's trying to hurt me or that did hurt me, they also have hurt. And hurt people hurt other people, right? And, I know you've all probably talked about that with bullying, that usually, bullies are usually being bullied by someone older and in a place of authority, right, that is bullying them, so they're taking it out on others. It's the same thing with hurt. It's the same thing with people that are lashing out or saying unkind things. And when you can have compassion and realize that they're doing the best that they can given the circumstances that they're in, and have empathy of feeling like, you know what, they might not be acting in the best way possible right now. They might be really had hit a nerve with me, but I see them as a human being. I see them as another person that also has their ups and downs. When you can take yourself out of being, again, that center of attention, right? That it's not directed like at you, right? That it's about something bigger. It's about them. It's about what's going on in their life as well. And you just carry that in. It allows you to, like I said, open up that door and love yourself more because you know that what they're saying is actually not true.
As we were talking about radical acceptance, when did you think that you fully well, I don't think we fully accept ourselves, but when do you think you really started the journey of radically accepting yourself, and what challenges did you face along the way?
But radical acceptance isn't about loving every single piece of ourselves. It's about accepting ourselves. So it's about accepting what is and saying, I'm enough, I'm okay. And it doesn't mean that I wake up every day and say, oh, wow, every single piece of me is the greatest, I still have things that I go, oh, that's okay. Maybe I wish it would be different. Maybe I wish I had bushier eyebrows, or who knows, right? But it's the acceptance part. It's the saying to yourself, I accept myself fully and wholly as the entity and what I bring to the world, and knowing that that's okay. I absolutely think that everyone can get there. And if there's things that you don't like, it's fine. That's those are natural human things. But liking and loving and accepting can all kind of be part of the whole game. You don't, so I would challenge that you could accept who you are, because I think when you do accept who you are, it allows you to say, I might not be 100% of my ideal, but I am enough, and I can navigate my world around me knowing that I have acceptance for myself. And I think that can be a really powerful thing when you are, walking around the planet and living your life.
Yeah, incredibly important. I think it's really important to also acknowledge that you don't have to love everything about yourself. I think that's important. I think you should definitely try to, but it's not always possible at times, to.
Yeah, and it's really important to know the difference between, to loving every single piece of you and accepting who you are, right? Because there are differences. Of course, not everyone's gonna, there's I could list of, 1,000 things that, if I really sat down and made a list of oh, that could be better, that could be better. But I could also sit down and list 2,000 things that I absolutely love, and I do that. So one of the things that I started to do when I kind of started this journey of okay, I need to love myself, because that is the thing that was missing, right? And always leading me back into maybe a depression or, a feeling of not being worthy. And I always tried to combat that with overachieving, right? So I would be well, if I'm the best at this, or, I build this, or then nobody can say anything bad about me because, I have these accomplishments over here that are going to compensate for the fact that I don't love myself, right? So when I stopped playing that game with myself, then it really became about, sitting down and saying, okay, what I literally made a pros and cons list, right? And I took some time with it. I was okay, here are all the things that I think are really great about myself, and here are the things that I don't love. And slowly but surely, the bad column, I started to nix out. Or if I didn't love something, oh, I'm always late, or, I'm too lazy, or I'm procrastinate, to move things over into a column and to start to say, okay, here are the things I can change and I can move to the good column, and here are the things that are going to be here forever, and it doesn't really matter, and I accept that. So I definitely make lists. I text my friend lists all the time. Whenever we have an exercise, when they're feeling down, I'm okay, I just start making notes about all the things I love about them. And then I send it to them like every day for 21 days. And just every day they get a text from me that says like all the great things about them. Because sometimes I think that you need to be reminded of what is great about you. And so I learned to remind myself, but then I think it's really important to also remind others.
Yeah, that's super important. We should do that. The friend thing, I was just thinking about that. That's so cool. Like not only having the acceptance with yourself, but then spreading it. I think that's incredibly important.
To spread, because everyone's walking around with this idea that they're not enough, right? But you have the people that you love. I think we learn that with our families first, and then we can spread that out into our community and our friends. And it's really important that we're constantly lifting up our friends and giving them the space, because not everybody has the same experience. Like not everybody comes from a place or a family or a community where they are being told the good parts about themselves. And so as a friend, I always look at it as my duty to make sure that when someone's going through a hard time, that I'm constantly like reminding them like, you're great at this, or you're this, or like, I love your clavicle bone. Like it doesn't even matter, right? It's like you just tell them good things, and that is kind of part of rewiring the brain to have that acceptance.
Yeah, it builds them up, which is really, really important. I know that this is, self-acceptance month, and a lot of people can work through so many things to fully accept yourself, and people go through so many disorders and things like that. And in particular, can you talk about any food issues that you had? We know that's like tough to talk about, but can you, just so that people like going through that know that it's something that a lot of people
I had a really bad relationship with food for a large portion of my life. And when I got to high school, I remember, I think it was probably like my first rejection from a boy or something that like triggered my like real self-loathing and my need to comfort with food. And I started to just kind of binge. I was a binge eater. And I would go home. I remember, I think I was a sophomore. No, I was a junior in high school. I would get a box of Kraft macaroni and cheese and a box of brownies. I would make them both. I would eat the entire pan of brownies, the entire pot of macaroni and cheese, clean up the entire kitchen, and take the anything that was evidence of what I had done, and I would take it like out to the outside trash. So like my mom never even knew that it happened. Then she'd come home from work, my sister would come home from, her activities, and we'd like sit down and have a meal as if I had never had anything. So that was like my way of coping, was just like coming home after school, like just so distraught and so emotionally tapped out. And so it really took me a long time to balance myself out of using food as an emotional tool. It's really hard. I mean, if you can imagine, food is the one thing that we do every single day. So it's like the easiest thing to get attached to and to make you feel comfort, physical sensation of comfort. So that was that carried with me throughout my 20s. And I just remember my mom got sick, and she's since passed away. And when she got sick, I remember the last 5 years of her life, she had to eat through a feeding tube. And it really changed my perspective about how we nourish ourselves. Learning how to do other things when I was upset than eat. So, meditation, I learned how to meditate. I, started to do yoga, like things that would slow my brain down in a way but also gave my mental state like something good to think about. But yeah, it was definitely a very long journey to teach myself to not comfort with food and to communicate when something was wrong. That took me a very long time to be able to talk to someone and to tell someone like why I was upset. And but little by little, it's just small things like reaching out to your friends and saying, instead of going home and being by yourself, reaching out, finding that one person that you can build a solid and safe relationship with, that you're able to say, like, I'm getting ready to eat a pan of brownies, like, can we talk? So there's all sorts of little things that help along the way, but it's definitely a journey because emotions they run very high in high school, and there's a lot, every day can be different. And if you imagine, like, think about all of the kids that are in a high school and all the different things that are happening in their lives and all the energy that they're bringing into one single day of high school, it can be very overwhelming. So that's why learning things, and that's why this center that has been built for kids to come and like process some of that information is a really amazing thing, because when we can process and we can communicate what's happening with ourselves, then some of those things that we typically would do, like eating or drinking or doing drugs, can become things that aren't necessary because we're actually communicating and being in relationship with what's going on with ourselves.
So hi, I'm May Cohen, and I'm a senior and a peer counselor. And so speaking of food, I was just wondering, how have you grown and built your relationship with food in your body thus far?
A couple of the habits that I started was just, I would do a countdown. So I used to emotionally eat. And so one of the things that I would do, if I didn't have anything, I would drive to the grocery store and so I started like sitting in the grocery store parking lot, and I'd give myself 5 minutes. It's like, you have to sit here for 5 minutes and actually feel what you're feeling. Like, don't just go in and like buy something and do that. Like, really sit here and feel. And I tell so many of my clients and subscribers, like, please, take a beat, take a minute before you start to emotionally eat. Think about, like, it's okay to process the information. It's okay to sit in a space and feel bad. It's kind of like that thing, some people can't deal with silence because they're like, if it's silent, then I have to think, and I don't want to be thinking. It's the same thing with having like a kind of a unhealthy relationship with food. It's like, if you can just pause and just really say, okay, it's okay to have a moment of silence and just to really say, I don't feel great about this right now. And just acknowledge it. Pretty much, I would say, pretty much of the time, that need to go in and like have something that's going to make me feel really comfortable right away, it goes away. So it's learning how to sit with pain. It's learning how to sit with discomfort. And it's the hardest thing to do, because as humans, we want to get as far away from pain as possible, like, right? We're not wired to just say, oh, I invite it. Like, pain can just be a part of my day, right? We want to avoid it. We want to avoid conflict. We want to avoid pain. We want to avoid trauma. But when you can actually, when you can sit in it, it just calms the waters a little bit, right? It still might not feel great, but at least you have a moment to say, I feel this way. I can accept that I'm feeling this way, and maybe I don't need to go and eat a pan of brownies. And so those were like that. I would say those two things were like the biggest thing, is just to take a moment and to know that it was okay to feel the way that I was feeling, and that running away from it, man, I mean, I did that for 2 decades, right? Would just be to run away from the feeling. And the interesting thing is then when you do that, you can never get on the other side of the feeling, right? If you run away from it all the time. But if you can sit with it, then you can say, oh, okay, there's a path like over this feeling, and it's not necessarily, a vice or something that's not going to be good for me.
I definitely think it's really important to actually sit in your feelings and understand that you're feeling this way and it's okay, and why you're feeling this way, and what's led to it. And with that, how or what do you feel has helped you take the steps to fully accept yourself?
I think it was a lot of little things that started to just kind of make the path really, really clear. One was being able to process my emotions and to understand what was going around me. 2 was probably, compassion and empathy, that the other people in the world were going on the same thing. And also, like I had mentioned, taking your ego out of how big your problem is, right? Because when you realize that, yes, it's big because you're feeling it, but so are 100 other kids around you that day. And when you realize that, you're like, oh, okay, this is part of what it is. It's not just me. I'm not the only one feeling that. And when you can feel connected and community into an issue or a thought, it lessens the weight of that thought. You know, when you know that somebody else is going through it, or you know that that's what's happening, it's not so heavy on your shoulders. You can share the weight with everyone else because, you know, everyone's experiencing it. So that helped.
And do you think that like practicing that form of self-acceptance is only like through your mind or through your body, or do you feel like there's other ways that it can like be practiced in your day-to-day life?
I mean, I think there's such a mind-body connection. I mean, one of the things when I started my company, the Fresh 20, it was really because I wanted small children to understand that there was a connection between what they ate and how they felt in their belly, right? And I think it's the same, that the information that you take in contributes to how you feel. And the information that we take in, the social media, the news, the other people saying things, you know, teachers, parents, siblings, friends, we're taking in all this information, and our body absorbs that information. And I think that the more that you can learn to deflect some of the information, the more that you can learn to say, okay, that's information, but I'm not going to hold on to that. That became really, really a really good tool for me to say, I don't have to take in what's being thrown at me, because if we do, it affects us physically, right? We get physically sick. I know when I start, you know, really getting into a depression mode or something, the first thing that happens is my body gets sick, right? Because it's the only way. I'm kind of a type A, like, you know, run business. I'm always doing something, you know, and so I don't like to stop on my own. So what happens is I'm taking in so much information, and I might be storing up negativity in my body, and then I get sick because it's the only way to slow me down, right? Because my mind is like, nope, I'm not going to slow down fast enough. And then so I think all of it's connected in a really big way, so that it's one of the reasons I get up and I meditate. I clear my mind out, right? So that I can get back to a place of acceptance and of love. So it makes my whole entire day easier. So in the morning, that's like the first thing I wake up and do. Like, you know, I have an app called Insight Timer, and I just pick it up and I listen to a meditation every morning. And it's a constant reminder that I can always try to be in that state of loving myself and self-acceptance, because when I'm in that state, everything else is easier. And it makes it possible for me to say, oh, whoa, like maybe what you're saying right now is not the kindest, and I'm not going to take that in. I'm just going to say, oh, okay, I'm going to leave that. I'm going to leave that right there with you, right? And it's easier to go about your day if you have those little things to constantly be reminding, right? Meditation, moving, like just sitting with yourself, moving your body. It's like some people really love exercise because it clears their head out. Like I have 2 sons. They're not going to meditate. They don't want to meditate with me. I've tried, but but they do know that when things get really heavy and they're starting to get super depressed or super bummed out, they will say, I'm going for a run, or Mom, I got to do something, or I got to get out of the house. I got to go can we go to the beach? Can we do something? You can have something that's going on in your life that can bring you back to that state of like, okay, if you can find your base state, the place where you're like, I'm in a comfortable place where I know I love myself, I love everyone else, and even though you might not like everyone else, I love myself, I love everyone else for the human experience that they're having, even though you might not like them. If that can be where you start your day, it makes everything so much easier, so you don't have to take it on as a personal affront. Like everything's not personal, you know? And so that was a really big part of my journey too, of realizing that everything is not personal. Yeah. And to stop taking things like, oh my gosh, that was targeted at me. I mean, have you ever had that moment where you're like walking down the hallway and somebody looks at you and then they look away, and then you think, oh my God, they dissed me, or they don't like me, or whatever. And the fact of the matter is that person wasn't, they're in this, like, they just got bad news and they're like looking into something else, or somebody just said something to them and you weren't even part of their thought or their existence, right? So the more that you can remove yourself from being that center of the universe, it is so helpful with me, right? Like, even down to the fact of like when someone cuts me off, like I used to be like, how dare they, did you just like, didn't you not see me, And then I'm just like, oh, you're in more of a hurry than I am, right? Like, it's not about me. It's about you being in a hurry. It's not about like you meant to cut me off, right? All of those things, like kind of programming your brain to just take yourself out of the middle really, really helped me with self-acceptance and self-love.
Yeah, and I think like especially with like clearing your head, whether it be through meditation or athletics, like it can really help refine that inner self-love and acceptance that you have. And you knew you had, but just like it kind of got clouded up with like insecurity or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But how do you think that you kind of get back on track after feeling that way, like feeling kind of negatively about yourself?
I spend time with the people that I love. Like when I remember, and I've had some pretty deep depressions in my life where I wanted to disconnect from the world, and the way back to that was asking for help, was talking to the people that I loved, having that trusted circle where you can go in and you can say like, I'm just really down. I can't cope right now. Allowing people in, allowing yourself to get help from other people. That's really, really important. Understanding what makes you happy. Like sometimes I think that for a long time, if you had asked me like, oh, Melissa, you have a completely free day today. What are you gonna do? I would not have had an answer. Like, and now I'm like, oh my gosh, give me a free day because I'm gonna read and I'm gonna, I'll paint. I've got all these little things, or all these little projects. I'm gonna make a polymer clay earrings. I've got all the materials so that when I do have free time, I'm like, I'm gonna dive into something that makes me feel creative. It took me a long time to realize that being creative was my happiness. So I think knowing what your happiness is also part of that, learning to accept yourself and learning like, okay, what can I do to be happy, right? Sometimes I think we're trying to get out of a funk or we're trying to get out of depression and we don't even know where we want to go after that feeling. So really kind of understanding what makes you happy. If it makes you happy to like, make music, listen to music, edit videos, create jewelry, do your own fashion, whatever, like get into that and then be or surround yourself with people, right? And sometimes not even the people that you might think. Sometimes we have these friend groups that we think, oh, it's my friend group. But so, like I tell my son this all the time, there are other kids that have things that you like to do that might not be in your friend group, but they might be feeling lonely too. So why not try to connect with someone that like loves to make beats the same way, like loves to make beats like you do. They might not be, your trusted factor, that person that can bring you up out of a bad time might not be somebody in your immediate friend group, right? Because they all look at you sometimes and they might know you as a certain person. And when you step out and you're like, I need to go be somebody else for a minute to get out of this, right? They might not be like totally accepting. So you want to find, someone that is. And, you guys have a great place for that. You can come to you. I mean, that's amazing that you guys have that. I didn't have that growing up. So I spent a lot of time alone or a lot of time, studying my navel or trying to figure out what's wrong. And so now in my adult life, the way that I bring myself out of that is I absolutely get connected to someone else. Because I think the fastest path out of depression or the fastest path out of a bad feeling or self-loathing is to help someone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And with that, what do you think that you would tell your sons if they were to be struggling or having like difficult moments in school?
Yeah, so I do that. We do experience that. I have a 17-year-old son. Obviously, he's goes through his ups and downs. So we have what we call an SOP in our house, a standard operating procedure for when you're feeling down. So he has like 3 things that he'll do, right? Listen to music, write in his journal, get up and go take a walk around the block. Like he does those 3 things and then he checks in and sees how he feels, right? So I'm constantly trying to give them tools and give them things that they can do so that he's not just, not wanting to get out of bed, not wanting to get up and go to school, not wanting to, it's like you constantly have to be figuring out, testing things, like have a curiosity about what makes you feel good, right? And I guarantee you, I don't think I've ever experienced anyone or heard of anybody that ever got up out of their house and took a walk around the block and didn't feel better when they got home. So I would definitely recommend that. It's like so simple, right? The part about radical acceptance and accepting yourself is just knowing that it's okay, right? It is okay to like have a bad day. It is okay to have, that your self-esteem might be low one day or higher the next. It is okay. Like, that is the process. There's no way around it as a human being. If you have those feelings, trust me, you're doing it right. You're doing human beingness as that is exactly what you're supposed to be doing. But we just don't want anyone to stay there.
We would like to thank our generous sponsors and partners, Michael J. LeBeau, BHHS PTSA, Norman Aid Peer Counselors, KBEV, and of course, we would like to thank our listeners. Stay safe and make today well lived.